It has 24-hour medical services, social activities, prepared meals. You could make friends with people who understand what you're going through. Her fake smile made me nauseous. What I'm going through? I asked, feigning confusion. And what exactly do you think I'm going through, Juliet? She looked at Ethan for support before answering. Well, loneliness, financial uncertainty, the fear of not being able to take care of yourself. It's normal at your age, Aurora. You don't have to be ashamed of needing help. The audacity of this 28-year-old woman telling me what was normal at my age left me speechless for a moment. But then I saw something in her eyes that chilled me. The absolute certainty that she had a right to my life, my home, my decisions. To her, I was no longer a person with autonomy, but an obstacle to be removed with as little resistance as possible. We've run the numbers, Juliet's father continued, pulling out a folder they had clearly prepared in advance. The cost of the residence would be approximately $2,500 a month. With the sale of your apartment, you'd have enough money to cover it for many years. And there would still be some left over to help Ethan and Juliet with their initial marriage expenses. There it was, the naked raw truth. It wasn't about my well-being or my safety. It was about money. It was about converting my home into cash to finance their unsustainable lifestyle. And if I refuse? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Aurora, Ethan said, his voice sounding rehearsed. We hope it won't be necessary to take more drastic measures. But if your mental health deteriorates to the point that you can't make rational decisions, the implicit threat was crystal clear. If I didn't cooperate voluntarily, they would seek legal ways to declare me incompetent. They had done their research. They had planned. They had prepared the ground to take everything I owned by force, if necessary. The son I had raised with so much love was sitting right there, allowing strangers to threaten his own mother. That night, after they left with my firm refusal, I cried for the first time in years, not out of sadness, but for the definitive death of the illusions I had held about my family. I had called Carlos immediately. I need you to investigate something urgently. I had told him through tears. I want to know exactly what the real financial situation is for my son and his fiancée. Everything. Debts, income, liabilities, everything. The results of that investigation had been devastating. Ethan earned $45,000 annually as a sales manager, but had debts of more than $80,000 on credit cards. Juliet worked part-time as an image consultant, making maybe $4,000 a year, but spent as if she had an executive salary. Together, they owed more than $120,000, not counting the loans they had taken out for the wedding. The apartment they rented for $2,000 a month was 3 months behind on payments. The cars they drove were financed with payments that took up 60% of their combined income. Their main credit card was maxed out, and they had started using cash advances to pay other debts. They were in a financial freefall, and my apartment represented their only hope of salvation. But there was something else in Carlos's report that had completely broken my heart. For the past 6 months, Ethan had been regularly calling banks and insurance companies, asking about loans against his elderly mother's property. He had been asking about legal procedures to obtain financial power of attorney over senior citizens. My own son had been planning my systematic dispossession for months. The most painful information had come at the end of the report. According to a private investigator Carlos had hired, Juliet had been telling her friends that she had sacrificed herself by getting engaged to an older, less attractive man because his mother had valuable properties and no competitive heirs. To her, marrying Ethan wasn't love. It was a strategic investment in my estate. That revelation had been the final straw. For weeks, I had considered simply revealing my true financial situation to them, thinking that maybe the shock would make them reconsider their behavior. But after reading that report, I understood that it wasn't about money or desperation. It was about a pure, calculated greed that had corrupted my son until he was unrecognizable. The days leading up to the wedding had been torture. Every phone call from Ethan was a new pressure to reconsider my position. Every visit from Juliet included poisonous comments about my stubbornness and selfishness. They had started to treat me as if I were already a senile old woman whose opinions didn't matter. The night before the wedding, Ethan had made his last attempt. "Mom, tomorrow is the most important day of my life. Please don't ruin it by being difficult. Juliet just wants what's best for all of us." His words had been the final confirmation that I had lost my son forever. The man who was getting married the next day was no longer the boy I had raised with so much love and sacrifice. And now, sitting in my car, waiting for Carlos, I realized that everything had led to this inevitable moment. It wasn't about revenge or cruelty. It was about justice. It was about showing them the consequences of their actions. It was about teaching them that some lines should never have been crossed. 15 more minutes, and everything would change forever. My hands trembled as I dialed the number for Joseph, my neighbor from the apartment next door. A 70-year-old man who had been a silent witness to all the tense visits of the last few months. "Joseph, it's Aurora. I need to ask you for a very important favor," I said, my voice shaking. "Could you go to my apartment and bring me the brown folder from the second drawer of my desk?" "Yes, right now." "It's urgent." Joseph had been like a brother to me since Robert passed away, and I knew I could trust him without him asking questions. While I waited, I remembered the conversation I had with Joseph just a week earlier. He had witnessed from his balcony when Juliet arrived with a real estate appraiser without notifying me. "Aurora, that girl brought a man with a briefcase who was measuring your apartment from the outside," he had told me with obvious concern in his voice. When they saw me, they left quickly. I don't like what's happening at all. Joseph had been the first to notice the subtle changes in Ethan's behavior over the last few months. "Your son doesn't greet me like he used to," he had observed. "He used to stay and chat with me when he came to visit. Now he rushes in and out as if he's ashamed of something." His words had confirmed what my heart already knew. I had lost my son long before the slap that night. The folder I had asked Joseph for contained documents no one in my family had ever seen. Bank certificates, property titles, investment records that Robert and I had kept secret for decades. Documents that proved the poor widow, living on a modest pension, was actually a woman with enough resources to change lives with a single decision. 10 minutes later, Joseph appeared in the parking lot with the folder in his hands. "Aura, what's going on? You look very upset," he asked as he handed me the documents. "It has to do with Ethan's wedding." I explained briefly what had happened in the ballroom, and I saw his face harden with every detail. "That woman is a viper," he muttered. "I always knew it." "Joseph, in a few minutes, a man named Carlos will arrive. When you see him, tell him I'm waiting for him here," I asked. "And Joseph, after tonight, many things are going to change. I want you to know you have always been like family to me." His eyes filled with tears as he nodded. "You're family to me too, Aurora. Do what you have to do." As Joseph returned to the building, I opened the folder and began to review documents I hadn't looked at in months. The first was a bank statement showing a balance of $5,400,000 in an investment account. The second was the property title for a downtown office building that generated monthly rent of $50,000. The third was the deed to a beach house I had bought as an investment 10 years ago. Robert had been a genius at investments, starting with a small import business and turning it into a silent empire. Together, we had made the decision to live modestly, to protect our privacy and our family security. Visible wealth attracts problems. Robert used to say, "Invisible wealth gives you power." I never imagined I would have to use that power against my own son. Each document in that folder represented years of hard work and smart decisions. The flower shop where I worked 3 days a week wasn't because I needed the money. but because I liked to stay active and connected to the community. The old car I drove wasn't due to economic limitations, but because I had learned that unnecessary ostentation only brings problems. My apartment, the one Juliet so coveted, was actually the least valuable property in my portfolio. I had bought it not for its economic value, but for the memories it held. It was where Robert and I had spent our last years together, where we had planned our future, where he had passed away in my arms after a brave battle with cancer. But there was something else in that folder that would change everything for Ethan and Juliet. For the last 3 years, since my son had started having financial problems, I had been secretly paying many of his debts. The credit card payments he thought came from a work bonus were actually coming out of my account. The special discount on his rent that he had negotiated with his landlord was money I transferred monthly. Without Ethan knowing, I had been subsidizing his irresponsible lifestyle for years. The luxurious apartment he lived in, the car he drove, even some of the expenses for the wedding that was taking place at that very moment had been made possible by my secret financial support. I had thought I was helping my son through a difficult time, not realizing I was financing his transformation into a person I didn't recognize. The bank records showed monthly transfers totaling $4,500 that had kept the sinking ship of Ethan's financial life afloat. Money he thought came from work bonuses or tax refunds, when in reality, it was his mother desperately trying to protect him from the consequences of his irresponsible decisions. The irony was devastating. While Juliet was humiliating me for being an economic burden on their future marriage, I was literally the only reason they could afford that marriage. While they were planning to strip me of my apartment to solve their financial problems, I had been solving those problems in secret for years. I closed the folder and looked toward the ballroom once more. The lights were still shining. The music was still playing. The guests were still celebrating. But in less than 5 minutes, Carlos would arrive with the final documents I needed. In less than 5 minutes, the process of cutting all the financial threads I had used to protect a son who had chosen to betray me would begin. This is not revenge, I reminded myself. This is justice. This is about teaching them that actions have consequences, that greed has a price, that family is not something you can sell for economic convenience. I had tried to protect Ethan from reality for too long, and that protection had corrupted him until he was unrecognizable. Headlights of a car approached the parking lot, illuminating the night with a white light that momentarily blinded me. It was Carlos, punctual as always, arriving with the documents that would change everything forever. I got out of my car and walked toward him, feeling how each step took me further away from the Aurora I had been, and closer to the woman I needed to become. "Mrs. Hughes," Carlos said as he got out of his car, a legal brief under his arm. "Are you completely sure about this? Once we go in there will be no way to undo what is about to happen." I looked toward the ballroom one last time, where my son and his new wife were probably still celebrating their victory over the useless old woman they had just humiliated. I have never been more sure of something in my life, Carlos. It's time for them to meet the real Aurora Hughes. Carlos opened his folder under the parking lot light and began to show me the documents he had prepared with his characteristic efficiency. "Mrs. Hughes, here is the order for the immediate suspension of all bank transfers you have been making in Ethan Hughes's name," he said, pointing to the first paper. "Also, here is the notice of cancellation of the lease agreement that you had confidentially guaranteed. The landlord will receive this document tomorrow morning." I took the papers with trembling but determined hands. Each document represented a thread that I had carefully woven for years to protect my son. And now I was cutting those threads one by one. "And the payment for the ballroom?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. "Cancelled." Carlos confirmed. "The deposit you had guaranteed will be withdrawn tonight." They will have until tomorrow to find an alternative form of payment. The magnitude of what I was about to do hit me like a cold wave. For 3 years, I had been the invisible safety net that had kept Ethan and Juliet's lives afloat. The apartment they lived in, the car he drove, even the wedding that was taking place at that very moment, had all been made possible by my secret financial support. And now, in a single night, I was going to withdraw all that support definitively. "Carlos, I want you to understand something," I said to him as I signed each document with a determination I hadn't felt in years. "This is not cruelty or revenge. This is the only way for them to learn the real value of things. For too long, I protected them from the consequences of their actions, and that protection corrupted them into people I don't recognize." "I understand perfectly, Mrs. Hughes," Carlos replied with genuine respect in his voice. "In my 30 years as a financial advisor, I have seen many families destroyed by greed and ingratitude. What you are doing requires more courage than most people possess." His words gave me the final strength I needed to take the last step. We walked together toward the ballroom entrance, and with each step, I could feel my heart beating faster. It wasn't nervousness I felt. It was a strange mix of sadness for what I had lost and anticipation for what I was about to regain. My dignity, my self-respect, my right to be treated as a human being instead of as a resource to be exploited.